My name's Adela, and I make minis. Last month, I challenged myself to make
100 vases in 100 days!
After last week's very time-consuming pieces, I made the decision to strip things back today. I was thinking about the dish-shaped neck I made last week and how I could incorporate that into an even simpler shape. In the end, I opted for the simplest shape I could, a cylinder. Once I'd attached my dish to the body, I added a little disc to close up the bottom, and then cut out the opening. I wanted to add some fluting to this piece, but it was super humid today, which meant my clay was taking forever to dry. Eventually, I gave up waiting and gave it a quick blast with a hairdryer and got to work. And there he is! I like this one so much, I think I'm going to make a larger version. I wanted to play with some colours today, so I started off by pinching out the two halves of my body, joining them together, rolling out the neck, and attaching it. I then added a fancy little foot and some nice big handles. Then it was time to come up with a design. I like to take a quick picture on my phone and then draw over it with the markup tools. It's the fastest way for me to get my ideas out without being precious. Once I'd decided on my design, I set about brushing on a layer of white slip, followed by my little flower in black slip. I felt like it could use something else, so I went ahead and etched out a smaller flower to give it a little more depth and interest. All in all, I'm quite pleased with this one. He looks like a tiny little penguin. Today started off much like yesterday. I began with making my pinch pot body, then moving on to the neck, pinching out a little rim, and then finally adding some handles. I'd really enjoyed painting yesterday and I wanted to keep it going today. Again, I snapped a quick pic and got to sketching. This time I settled on some zigzags, which should bring some movement to the piece. I started out marking the lines with my pencil, so I had something to follow with my paintbrush, because my freehand is not the best. However, I quickly ditched the idea of painting them on, because just etching them out like this looked amazing. I really loved the results of this one. It's a great shape with lots of room for tiny bouquets or a larger stem, and the pattern is simple but effective. I'm curious to see how this etching might look if I'm a little bit lighter or looser with the work. So on day 39, I set about testing this idea. I knew I wanted a spherical body and a neck that was pinched out rather than made from a slab. I opted for a nice tapered neck, which I attached to the body with a tiny clay sausage. Once it was on, I instantly knew that I wanted to play with scalloped edges, so I set about cutting them out with my needle tool. I can already tell that the summer is gonna be my enemy. It was so hot today that my clay was drying out at breakneck speeds. It was helpful for this bit, but not so much for when I was adding my handles, which already dry out quickly and crack on cooler days. Once I was happy with my shape, I painted on a white layer of slip, which is just coloured liquid clay. Today I attempted to be much looser with my pencil, and it already looked so much better, even if it wasn't perfect. I love it. I just hope that the pattern still pops when it comes out of the kiln. On day 40, I decided to carry on looking at surface decoration. I'm really happy with the shapes that I'm currently making. They're practical and nice to look at. So now I feel like I finally have some space to think about colour and pattern. I created another 4-handled vase and gave it some nice bold stripes. I did 2 layers of slip to make them more opaque, as this slip tends to come out a little bit more translucent if you only do one thin layer. I'm a big fan of this piece and I cannot wait to see it finished. And speaking of, all of the minis that I make during this challenge will be available through my website when they're finished. Just keep an eye out for updates. I wanted to revisit the etching that I'd been doing earlier this week. I want to call it Sgraffito, but I'm not 100% sure if it is. Maybe let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. So once I got my handles on, I cut out an opening and pinched up a short neck straight from the body. Then I cleaned the joint from the inside and painted on a layer of white slip. I wanted to go for a continuous pattern that flowed nicely and didn't need much accuracy, so I went for this loop-de-loop design. I really focused on being loose and speedy for this one, and it paid off. Look how cute it turned out. There's so much more movement to the lines. Day 42 was a little bit frustrating. I'd made a lovely little shape, added my handles, and now I needed to level out the bottom. I usually do this by tapping the piece onto the table a few times and then giving it a little twist. 9 times out of 10, this works a treat. However, today was just not my day and the bottom just would not level out. I tried it so many times that I ended up widening the base and shortening the whole piece. He's still a cutie, just shorter than I'd initially wanted. I then decided to switch things up and paint him with my black slip, and then finished him off with some little circles. I'm not sure if the double handles worked for this one. He reminds me of a little spider, but it's definitely something I'm going to play around with next week. So that's week 6. Thank you so much for watching. I've got 58 minis left to make and I really hope you join me for those. Please do leave a like if you enjoyed this and make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss next week.